Minnesota Party of Minnesota. My name is Rebecca Whiting. I'm one of your hosts. And with me, I also have Harrison Hicks, Joey Gamache, and Kevin Bradley. And today we're just going to have kind of a roundabout discussion and kind of just see where that goes. But first, we have a few events, and you can find these events on lpmn.org on our website. We have a virtual meet and greet October 1st, and that link, there's a Zoom link, and that's on the website. So if you want to go and just kind of talk to other libertarians, ask questions about the party, any of that kind of stuff, go find that Zoom link on our website, and it'll direct you to us. October 1st at 8 p.m. That's a Sunday evening. October 3rd, CD5 is having their October meeting, Ghouls and Their Ghoulish Goals, at the Spring Street Tavern. October 11th, CD4 is meeting having their October 23 meetup at Sergeant Pepper's Grill and Bar. We have another virtual meet and greet October 15th, and then CD5 meets again November 4th for Adopt a Street Cleanup Day at Urban League Twin Cities. Okay, so anyways, if you want information about the party, lpmn.org, you can do membership or, find out information, all that kind of stuff. So I guess without anything else, that's let our conversation begin. So.
All right. I've got something that actually came up earlier today. Someone close to me received the American Community Survey, which is I think long form is a bit of an understatement, a deep dive. Let's go with that. A deep dive into residents' personal, financial, and medical information. It is quite shocking the degree to which the government thinks it is entitled to our information.
So it's from the census.
Yes, it is from the U.S. Census Bureau.
I wonder how often they send those out and to how many people a year. It feels like, it's not a census year, so.
Yeah, I actually, because I have the thing right here. I'm not going to put it on screen. It's got an address on it. But I will say, I talked over the phone with someone from the Rutherford Institute earlier today about this very issue, because I found a lovely piece that the founder of the Rutherford Institute had placed on LinkedIn just this past March, talking about all of the egregious things that are in this and all of the dubious questions that arise when one looks into how the Census Bureau handles this data. And they had a form letter, which unfortunately is a little bit out of date, on what to respond with. And the letter does not explicitly state that one will not participate in the survey. However, if one sends that letter in lieu of survey responses, the implication is quite present, because it talks all about, calls out specific questions, which that's one of the reasons that it's unfortunately a little bit out of date. But it calls out specific questions, things like, how many times a week do you bathe? Now, for the life of me, I cannot think of a good of society reason that the government would need to know that information.
I mean,
I think not just the primary homeowner, but every single resident in the home.
I'd want to know. If my neighbor wasn't bathing, and
you'd want to know.
Yeah, I mean, what if I got long distance leprosy or something?
Well, I mean, if you're just go knock on his door, and if you can smell him, that's probably a good indication.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
There would be signs if somebody just didn't bathe.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Fair point. All right. Libertarianism affirmed.
What? We don't need government intervention for knowing how often our neighbors bathe?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah,
maybe there should be a law for that.
Who decides who gets these surveys? I don't think I've ever received one of those.
I think it's pseudo-random, but if you respond to one, they're more likely to send another.
Oh, that's okay. That makes sense. Maybe
because if they send one to you every year, it's because you respond every year. You might respond by sending it by writing return to sender over the top of the place where it says what's the exact language? Your response is required by law. If you write
Yeah.
return to sender and send it back to them, hey, they know you're active and they know that someone still lives at that address.
And exactly which law is it that we're violating?
Actually, that is an interesting question. I don't have the exact statute cite for you, but I can tell you that the attorney that I spoke to over at the Rutherford Institute, a part of their legal division, said that there was actually a case on this. It is the United States District Court, Western District of Washington at Tacoma. It is a perhaps we can drop the link, or that's not exactly cooperating on YouTube these days, but perhaps we can drop it in there anyway to the case file, because it is a now dismissed class action that was brought by named individuals against the against Gina Raimundo, who is the current head of the Census Bureau, on the basis that these are invasive and harassing, and that they should not be answered to, and in fact they should not be asked in the first place.
They'll come to your house.
Yeah, they will.
Is this the first letter he's gotten?
Yeah, this is the first letter the individual I'm thinking of has gotten, yes.
Yeah, so because they send out the Department of Ag in Minnesota, or actually it's not just Minnesota, but it's Department of Ag in general sends these out also for farms, and our house, our property is registered as an actual farm, and so we get one of those from Department of Ag. Well, we've gotten quite a few of them. And now that you said maybe if you respond to it in any way, that they just keep sending them to you. Because the way that I've responded to them is by crossing it out and saying return to sender. And if I'm feeling really salty, just writing on there saying you didn't say please over the required by law, or like crossing it out on the inside and being like, I'm not responding to this or something like that. I haven't ever responded to one of those, but they will send somebody to your house. Our benefit is, as at the end of our property, we have a gate that's quite a bit of ways from our house, and they're not allowed to open the gate and walk onto your property if it's shut. So that kind of helps us. You can't actually just walk onto our property anywhere. So yeah,
by my understanding and by the conversation I had with the Rutherford Institute individual, they have a common practice of waiting a week or two to see if you'll respond to the written form, and if they hear nothing back, if they have an associated telephone number, they will call it.
Oh,
and
they
do. They'll call it a
Mhm.
couple of times, and if they don't get a response that way, or if it seems like there's the wishy-washiness, maybe if they got a visit in person, they would fill it out. Then they will send someone to your door. If they can access your front door, they will send someone to your front door. And they will do that most often on nights and weekends when they think that you will be home from work. But you are technically, by law, required to answer. The fine is written in the statute as $100 for failing to answer a question posed in a U.S. Census Bureau survey, or $500 for answering such a question in a dishonest manner. And that's not the exact language in the statute, but that's the gist of it. Is if you lie, it's $500. If you just fail to give the information, it's $100. But no one has been prosecuted under that statute since the 1970 census.
Yeah, so
and that was the basis on which the lawsuit was dismissed. The class action against the U.S. Census Bureau was dismissed by that circuit court on the basis that, oh, well, they don't enforce this anyway. Well, we in Minnesota are very familiar with, oh, well, they don't enforce this anyway, but let's leave it on the books as friction, as intimidation, just because it benefits the government to, through stagnation, leave things on the books that intimidate regular people. But the case was dismissed without prejudice. So that means that if the Census Bureau decides to start targeting people, they're probably going to start with the people who, in legal court documents on the record, stated that they had received such a survey, that they did not respond to it, and that they never planned to respond to it.
Oops.
Those would be the first person they targeted. But that would immediately grant an opportunity to reopen the case, because the reason for its dismissal would be moot.
Well,
because it was dismissed on the basis that no prosecution would occur.
I guess that means I'm probably on another list then. Department of Ags.
Aren't we all?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, well,
I'm not sure how the Department of Ag treats that.
Well, I mean, if it's how they go after farms that, aren't within compliance, then it's probably pretty hard. So they don't like it when people don't follow the rules.
It's also possible that because they're a government entity other than the U.S. Census Bureau, no one has written a piece of legislation mandating that people respond to their requests. So ignoring their requests can only be persecuted by them under certain circumstances.
So when a case is dismissed without prejudice, does that qualification automatically end any pending cases that are under the same circumstances?
If other cases have already been folded into the class when it was dismissed, then it being dismissed does also dismiss those cases that got folded into it. But if there had been something else that hadn't been folded into the class for whatever reason, different facts, different sought remedy, something like that, then no, it would still be out there on its own. But with the question of with prejudice versus without prejudice, dismissing something with prejudice means that that same case under those same facts cannot be brought again. So without prejudice means that if the one key fact that the court is assuming that no prosecution will occur changes, the rest of the facts are still of the same case, but now it can be brought again, even though it was dismissed, because it was dismissed without prejudice.
Well, I don't like getting the things in the mail. It just makes me frustrated when something is written on there saying you have to comply. Like, well, this is a really easy way of not complying by just sending it back and telling you I'm not going to comply.
You know how every agency that the government has their own enforcement, like their own cops, basically.
Like the Department of Education has its own SWAT team.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, would there be any clever way to pit them against each other? Like, I don't know. Like, what have you? What have you pissed off?
I posited this when I was on the phone with the individual from the Rutherford Institute. Actually, I asked because he was mentioning sometimes the agents will sit in their car across the street from your front door for up to 30 minutes at a time, waiting for you to get home from work. And I asked, interesting. I wonder if anyone ever called a wellness check on them. Hey, you. Apparently you've been sitting out in front of this house for almost half an hour now, and you keep glancing up at this door. Is there some reason you need to be here? Oh, you're a census worker? Sure you are. Let me see some documentation for that. Slowly.
If somebody showed up to, like, on our road to do something similar like that, like we have 3, maybe 4 neighbors on our entire road, and it's all like, it's all spread out and lots of woods because it's farms, and there's a lot of it's heavy woods on one side, and anyways, that would be cause for calling the sheriff's department for sure, because we don't even get traffic on our road,
Right.
So
have you guys seen that video?
So this is.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask. So this particular department is part of the U.S. Census Department that's doing this?
Oh, what I'm talking about, that is the U.S. Census Bureau. I'm not sure. they're granted their authority from Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution in part, and the rest of it comes from other nonsense that the U.S. federal government has done over the last handful of decades.
I guess I'm just wondering about the enforceability of their so-called fines solely because they don't do it to everybody. For instance, the census, supposedly everybody is supposed to do the census. Well, I've never gotten one of these. So if they're arbitrarily deciding who gets one and who doesn't, how can they possibly, what's their legal standpoint for saying you must respond to this? It's like, well, you just arbitrarily pulled our name out of the hat. Why isn't my neighbor getting it? What's the legal standing that supposedly requires people who get it to respond to it if they're randomly chosen? That makes no sense to me.
I would guess that as long as there is no demonstrable prejudice involved in picking who gets zapped. It's kind of like taxes, like they're not going to catch everybody who tries to dodge taxes, but they do the best they can, and they'll get who they can.
Right.
I found the site.
Everybody is supposed to file taxes.
Right.
This is the first I've ever heard of this survey. So it's like either it applies to everybody or it applies to nobody. How can it apply just to people that they randomly choose?
Yeah.
That's what I'm arguing.
My understanding is that they administer it on a rolling basis. So they send it to a pseudo-random selection of 3.5 million houses every year. And that could be the same 3.5 every single year, or it could be a different 3.5 every single year. And because they claim it's random, then there you go. It could happen to anybody. It could happen to you. And because they administer it rolling throughout the year, you could get yours tomorrow.
And because we're having this podcast and the NSA is listening, I will get one next week.
But the law in question is 13 U.S. Code 224. So it's not law. It's not statute. It is administrative. It is administrative mandate.
So some desk jockey was like, "Hey, we want people to do
this."
This.
It was in fact passed into law, I believe, but it didn't start that way. October 17th, 1976. So thank you to Senate from 1976. Very, very appreciative.
Oh.
And it specifies, come on, where is it? Whoever blah, 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 blah. Other authorized officer neglects or refuses when requested by the secretary or other authorized officer or employee of the Department of Commerce or bureau or agency thereof to answer completely the question to the best of his knowledge, all questions relating to his company, business, institution, establishment, religious body, or other organization, or to records or statistics in his official custody, shall be fined not more than $500. And if he willfully gives a false answer to any such question, shall be fined not more than $10,000.
Well, I found the loophole. It's the "to my knowledge" piece.
Deny, deny, deny.
Yeah, I mean, it's don't respond at all. But if you do respond in the exact language that people use when they're brought before Congress. I do not recall. I can't think of anything right now, but I'll ask. I could get back to you. I could get back to you on that. I could get back to you. Not saying I will, but I could.
Wipe it like with bleach?
No, bleach bit. You've got to acid wash the servers.
Right,
yes.
right.
Oh, right.
No, my God. Okay.
So, Kevin, you had something too to keep the.
Well, okay. So today, on the Mises Caucus national website, I think, or Facebook page, somebody, I don't remember who, was apparently taking an informal poll as to whether RFK Jr. would be a good candidate for president as a libertarian. to my knowledge, he has made no overtures that he is the least bit interested. So I'm curious as to where the question is coming from.
I keep seeing an article popping up that he did meet with, I guess,
Angela.
McArdle.
Yeah, I saw that too, that he met with the chair. So it'd be Angela.
Mm-hmm.
This room, the sun started going down and I can't see myself. Okay.
Well, that's because you're in the Arctic Circle.
Yeah. Okay, that's better.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess he did meet with Angela about it, or about something. We don't know what. It was a while back too, I think, like May or something.
Oh, so privately and not in like a recorded meeting, or they didn't record it?
I just have seen the headlines, but it seems that way.
Oh.
I haven't looked into it. So.
Well, I suppose as the chair of a political party, that there would be, I mean, I don't see that as being, any suspicious. She would be talking to a lot of people.
Right.
Yeah, she could have a private meeting with Tulsi Gabbard. It doesn't mean that Tulsi Gabbard is gonna, oh, boom, we've got a new presidential nominee, and it's someone who's been Democrat until 8 seconds ago. No, I personally, my thoughts on RFK Jr. is that he is the most interesting person that the Democrats are fielding right now.
Mm-hmm.
Despite their best efforts, apparently.
Yeah.
But he is still on the table.
He's kind of he's made a name for himself, especially with COVID stuff. But he had kind of made a name for himself already. Well, actually, take that back. He was born into a family who already
was, in fact, born into a name.
Yeah,
yes.
He already had the name. But he has on his own, additionally, like to me, I appreciate a lot of his research and things that he does. I mean, he's still a Democrat, but I like listening to his perspective on things because he's able to articulate it in other ways that a lot of politicians and a lot of people can't.
Did you see his interview with Joe Rogan?
I did, and I listened to the whole thing. That might have been the only Rogan episode I've ever listened from beginning to end. It was really good.
Saw clips, and that was better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did watch it, the whole thing, and I also read the book. My son actually gave me RFK Jr.'s book, and I had no idea about his background. I mean, other than the fact that he's a Kennedy.
Yeah.
I didn't really know anything about his background. I was assuming he was a lawyer, but I didn't know his environmental activism, and I didn't know anything about his the accusations that he's anti-vax. And so he really, in the book, he really talks about how he's never been anti-vax. He's anti something being presented as a vax that has not been thoroughly studied and tested. That was his position. But in his book, he totally goes after Bill Gates and Fauci.
Yeah.
Just tears them apart.
I listened to him on an interview with Tom Woods, and that was that was the first place I'd ever heard him talk, and it was about the book. And then it just kind of started spiraling from there for me. That's where I was like, oh, I need to hear more of what he had to say and it wasn't just how he was talking about it and that kind of stuff, but talking about subjects that other people just won't touch because of the repercussions of it on them personally, that he is willing to engage in and debate and, all this kind of stuff that he doesn't have the boundaries that other people do.
Well, and I have heard him described by some, and I don't know where their political leanings are, but I've heard him described as the Trump of the Democratic Party. Because like Trump couldn't be bought.
Right.
I don't know if Kennedy owes anybody anything, so it's just interesting. I do agree. I think he's the most interesting Democrat out there. I remember a few years ago, some of my libertarian friends were really pushing Tulsi Gabbard, and I went to the website and I saw the whole universal health care, and I'm like, no, we're not going down that road.
Right.
So I was just really interested to see how many people who call themselves libertarians were really behind Tulsi Gabbard, and now there's this push, like you say, Angela talked to him, but people are now asking, hey, what do you think of RFK Jr. as a libertarian? And I guess it's the age-old question. You could say that anybody is leaning left or right, even within the Libertarian Party. Do we have to take the bad with the good in order to make a name and get us out there? I think back to Jesse Ventura, from Minnesota. He's not really a libertarian, but he got connected with the Libertarian Party. And it brought some people at least awareness to the Libertarian Party of Minnesota because of that connection. Is that good? So
depends on what he's talking about, I guess.
Right.
With Tulsi Gabbard, what I appreciated about her was that she got to a point where she was like this, calling out the sins of the Democratic Party, basically, and decided she was going to leave. Now, she didn't come around and fully embrace, liberty and freedom and stuff like that. She still got her points. But I think that at some, for a lot of people, they just, that initial issue that they were struggling with the major parties and is what caused them to leave. Like, this is, the journey into libertarianism is, it's a journey. It's a long, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so there's still opportunity for them to change. But the fact is that somebody like Tulsi and RFK have shown to me that they are willing to change their positions when presented with alternate information, instead of just clinging to their, old ideas and, maintaining the party no matter what the cost is, because that's where it becomes toxic, right?
Okay, I'm going to give the answer that I've been giving everybody on Twitter on this one. The LP has a really great strength that isn't available to any of the mainstream parties or any other party. Well, I guess other parties too, but certainly not the big two. And that is, we can afford to be principled. One, because we don't have that much money or influence or power. And two, because we actually have principles to adhere to. I think if you're considering the LP is generally right-leaning with, some notable exceptions, we already have a right-wing party that has a political strategy of compromising to reduce the size of government. And that's the GOP. They already exist. That's their whole platform. We don't need another GOP. So we get to stand on our principles, mostly because we can't really afford to not do so anyway. But that's not a negative. That's a positive. The LP should exist to be hardline, because we have principles to be hardline about, and it's all for nothing if we compromise those. That's not to say that we can't dialogue with people who espouse libertarian-friendly views. We don't have to endorse them as a candidate. That doesn't gain them much. And
it just dilutes our position.
Right. Like it's just a lose-lose. Whatever street cred we may earn from interacting with a major candidate, we gain just from discussing things with them, period. There will be all the articles written, there will be headlines, and that's all the attention we need. I think we stand far more to lose than to gain by diluting ourselves with other candidates.
Yeah, well, and if they were ever to join, if they were to decide, hey, they want to become a libertarian and join the party, for them to be one of the candidates that we were to consider for nomination for president or whatever these major positions are, like they would have to come around and prove that they could maintain that position and the principles of the party before I would consent to give them my vote or whatever,
Right.
They were still the way I explain the Libertarian Party to other people is that, with like the GOP and the DFL in Minnesota, they have an agenda you have to fall into that agenda. and there's not room for compromise within their agenda. But the Libertarian Party doesn't have an agenda. Like freedom, liberty, personal, that's the single voting issue versus, well, are you pro-life? Are you pro-choice? Are you pro-marijuana? Are you against it or legalization? The other parties have these lists, yes or no. And the Libertarian Party is just, well, does it help with progress freedom for people? Then it's not an agenda. It's just how it was intended to be,
Right. And that's not even to say that every LP candidate has to be 100% LP minded. I mean, if you have some other kind of statist idea or whatever, that's fine. Just shut up about it. Don't have it be a part of your platform. As soon as you transgress what our ideals are, then we'll yoink you. So you have your own little weird idea. That's fine. Just keep it to yourself.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if you had something that was not very libertarian, what would you pick about yourself?
Me personally?
Yeah. I mean, like if something that maybe conflicts with the Libertarian Party, where would that be?
I personally think the world would be better off with a Thanos snap.
Oh.
Need
I
lot
can
of
honestly
people.
see that. I can. Yeah, that's
People generally suck, and I'm okay with less of them.
Was Thanos the villain, or was he actually the good guy? Like that was never very clear to me.
Okay, I'm going to appeal to Hanlon's razor on this one, where you could debate whether or not he was evil, but he was stupid at any rate, because mathematically, you got population growth and an exponent, so it's just gonna we're gonna be right back where we were within 20 years or whatever. So it's like
it wasn't a long-term solution.
Right, it really wasn't.
And he should have known that too, because it wasn't like his species, like he was an old, he lived a long time.
Right.
So he should have known that. He should have been able to project kind of that intelligence. Yeah, he wasn't very smart.
Yeah.
I'm relatively new to this podcast here. We have a chat. Does that appear to the viewers, or do we need to read that, or listeners, whatever?
I think we ought to use it. I think we ought to read it. I don't think.
Yes. Let's bring them in.
I doubt that they can see it.
I can see it. I'll read it. It says, choosing RFK as an LP candidate now is akin to when Nick Sarwark said that we should be willing to run John McCain as a libertarian if he was willing to run just for the sake of winning.
That is
John McCain. He was a terrible Republican. No, he was actually a really good Republican, but he would have made a terrible libertarian candidate.
Yeah.
Did he ever indicate running as a libertarian?
Oh no,
it was a hypothetical posed to him to point out the absurd lengths that the arguments about a couple of candidates who I believe did actually get the nomination. What some of their more corporate Republican bona fides indicated about the willingness of the party to compromise on principle to find a winning candidate. And Nick Sarwark was asked very directly, would it go to this extent? And his answer was to win for the good of the party? Yes. No.
Well,
the party is not the movement is not served by that, and to the degree to which the party exists to serve the movement, the party is therefore not served by either.
Yeah.
Well, that brings up an interesting point, because the stated purpose of the Libertarian Party of Minnesota is to run candidates for office. That is the primary purpose. I find it interesting that the primary purpose is not to focus on libertarian principles.
Well, interestingly, if you read the books published by the original founder of the Minnesota Libertarian Party, not the original founder, that's unfair, but the first chair of the party, he had a few things to say about the matter, and his take was that the primary purpose ought to be to spread liberty, and the secondary purpose should be to act as a political party, that it is a media arm that performs party duties as well.
And there's a lot of people within the party that feel that way, despite what, the running political candidates, despite that, they still, and like for me, you're not going to get a voting bloc that's willing to vote for a libertarian candidate without first spreading the libertarian culture.
Agreed.
So, which one comes first, the egg or the chicken? Well, if it was the politicians that came first and then libertarianism would catch on, it would have caught on already. We would have already,
Yeah.
we went
We've got plenty of bad examples to learn from
Yeah.
at this point. If the message were gonna spread itself, it would have already happened.
Yes, exactly. And I would argue that instead of it, the country being freer, we've gotten even more authoritarian. So we've gone backwards instead of forwards.
Oh, absolutely. And maybe antithetical to Harrison's idea of the Thanos snap. I love that. I want a T-shirt that says the Thanos snap. But the antithesis to that is the fact that as a libertarian, I'm willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to say, fine, we're never going to win, but I'm not going to give up my principles just to win an election.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just as extreme as the Thanos snap, but from a different perspective.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
even if you did give up your principles to win an election, it's just one.
Mhm.
One in, I mean, how many seats do we have in Congress? And then the executive branch, the judicial branch, the states, the local races. I mean, you can't just take one win and be like, great, we did it, like this is.
Even if it were the president itself, congratulations, that's one political functionary.
Yeah.
Right.
What did you
so
give
many
up in
people.
order to get that?
I made a tweet
And
the other day.
and I think it's a cancer kind of thing. I mean, with my little bit of medical background, it's if you give up on principles, if you give up on the basic processes of your organization to gain a particular foothold with other parties or run a particular candidate, I think you are inviting in a cancer that digs at the foundation and will ultimately, it'll come back and bite you eventually. So it's like, I have to stand on principle. So it's like, Rebecca, you were challenging us. What could we possibly, where do we possibly fall short of the libertarian principles? I have been accused, and I say accused intentionally because it was used as an insult, but I decided that it was actually a compliment. I'm such a pure libertarian that I don't have anything. I just say, as long as it's about individual liberty, everything must start with the individual. So do what you want, anything you want to yourself, your body, your property, as long as it doesn't interfere with somebody else's right to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And everything else flows from that.
Well, and you can have, like, for me, I would say I'm a little more left-leaning when it comes to environmental things. And I'm a little more right-leaning when it comes to, other issues like, economy or business, that kind of thing. But, I can be in that, we're not talking about like, keeping people like on a black or a white spectrum, black or white sides, there's a spectrum of all of it. But as long as where you recognize wherever it is that you fall in that spectrum, and you're not willing to use the state to enforce your way of life, then you can have that position. Like I would really love it if, we were more of an agricultural kind of country and did more, less. I would be like of the persuasion of less technology, less of like electricity, less energy, less all of that, and more. But I mean, I live in rural Minnesota too, so.
But you're also not going to go protest
Yeah.
somebody who is not living that
Right.
way.
I'm not going to ask the state
Right.
to make a law to enforce that on everybody else. So I will ask the state to make a law to free it up so that there's less regulation, less laws, like undoing some of the laws that they've put on the books already. So I guess hadn't picked a topic because it was like, I tend to gravitate towards certain things that I really love to talk about. And then I get a little too eager and it's all I talk about. But I want to talk about raw milk because it keeps coming up a lot for me. So we've been working on trying to free up regulation in the state and Department of Ag. I didn't realize how many laws and how many regulations there were that incorporates food and the production of food and animals and processing and all that kind of stuff till I became, we started doing farm stuff. And it's an extraordinary amount. Like every part of everything that's put on your plate, if you haven't made it yourself, has been over-regulated by the government. Federal government, state government, all of it. And so that's, I reached out to a representative last year about changing some of the raw milk laws, and then reached out to a senator this year. And so we may see some raw milk law changes in Minnesota at some point in the next legislative session. So that's kind of exciting, but we'll see what happens. Yeah. And what it would do is make it so that you can legally sell raw milk in Minnesota at places like farmers markets, which you can't now. You can't. Marijuana is more. Marijuana is less legal or less regulated right now than raw milk is.
I'm guessing most Minnesotans have no idea about that.
I'm always like, well, I kind of gauge my audience, like who am I going to, but then I'm surrounded by people that do a lot of the same stuff I do. And so they're like, oh yeah, they know the rules. But a lot of people just don't understand how the Department of Agriculture in Minnesota is just crushing small farms. They don't see it because, they go to the grocery store, get their food, bring it home, cook it, or a lot of people just don't know how to cook. So they're, buying things that are pre-made, and that's how they're eating. They're not even cooking for themselves.
So I'll pretend the old devil's advocate thing here. How do you, as a dairy farmer and somebody who wants to do this, how do you respond to people who say, well, the reason for the regulation is to protect the public from people who don't have the proper cleanliness standards or whatever?
You don't engage with those people. You just
we just don't talk to them. Well, that's actually really easy because if you buy a bad food product from a farm, you're only going to go to them once, and like in farmers markets, small towns, even like agricultural community, and the people that have small farms, you notice very quickly that everybody knows each other. So your reputation is your success totally depends on your reputation. So if I'm selling people milk that's going to make them sick, they're never going to come back and get milk from me, first of all. Second of all, they're going to be telling their friends not to come get milk at our place. And, like I would be able to sell a gallon of raw cow's milk for $5 a gallon but that food is one of those things where if you buy it one day, you're going to have to buy it the next day and the day after that and the day after that, because you need that item every day for the rest of your life. Right. So if you're losing a customer, you're not losing just that one sale. You're losing a relationship with that customer that potentially can go on for years at $5 a gallon. So that the longevity of what you're losing is pretty substantial. You don't want to lose those customers, especially not when I think it's like 10%. Farmers are only making 10% of what the product that they're selling. 10% is profit, and that's it. Because of the amount, the cost of feed is substantial right now. Cost of oats, corn, barley, all of those things have gone up a lot. And it's not just inflation that's caused those feeds for animals to go up, but it was also, we had a pretty significant drought in Minnesota in 21 that where entire crops were just failing. The hay crops failed, the corn crops failed, wheat just completely failed. And so there was this substantial increase in feed because you still got to feed your chickens, still got to feed your cows. And the cost of a 50-pound bag of feed doubled from that one season of crop failures. But the cost of hay to be able to keep cows, because you up here, well, and down there too, but you don't have hay or grass through the winter. You have to be able to have hay to be able to get your cows and your livestock through the winter. And you have to be able to stock that up in the summer when it's plentiful to be able to get it through the winter until next spring when the grass starts growing again. Well, when the hay fields were failing because we didn't have rain from April to October that year, not at all. Like everything was dead, dry, yellow, the ditches, trees were dying, everything was dying. Like we're still losing trees because of the drought in 21, because it takes 5 years of no drought for a tree to make it. So it takes 5 years of recovery for a tree. And then this year, this is another drought year, 23.
Yeah, it hasn't been great since then.
Yeah, we had rain a couple of days ago and things like instantly greened up, but the ditches were yellow again. The things are just not doing good.
It didn't soak in.
Yeah. But that deep water from not having the rain in one drought year takes 3 years to recover the deep water that's underground. And we haven't really had that recovery. So the fields aren't doing as well as they could, which has driven the cost up of the grains. But also because the hay fields failed that year, we saw our hay bales go from $45, $50 for a 1,200 pound of hay up to $200. So it was a quadruple increase that year for hay. The way that we were able to make through it was we sold off 75 to 80% of our herd we had to sell to be able to buy hay to make it for the rest of the herd so that we could get through to the next year. So that's one of the, farming is this you have a lot of high risks because you're dependent on the weather. And that was a really bad year. But that's why 10% of what farmers are actually getting back is only profit. It's 10% or less. It's not much. So, we're depending on people, taking in a good product and liking it because our reputation isn't what keeps people going. And if you don't have that, if you have a bad reputation, you're not going to be a successful business. So I can't sell a bad product. I'm going to have to sell good milk. And if I'm getting people sick from raw milk, then we don't deserve to be in business at all. So,
gee, it almost sounds like you're advocating the idea that a free market regulates itself.
Yeah, kind of it does. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and other states too that have good raw milk laws, like Idaho, for instance, has a raw milk law where you can basically take your raw milk and you can make it into cheese and yogurt and ice cream and butter and all these milk products. But they don't have health issues. Like the state, there's no health crisis because of their raw milk laws. So if it's working in other states, theoretically it'd work in our state too.
So what's the timeline for knowing if anything's going to change in the Minnesota laws for that?
We have to see what happens next legislative session. So we have a bill that will go through the House of Representatives, and we also have a companion bill to be able to go through Senate. And both Senate and House of Representatives have to pass the bill for it to pass. And I don't exactly know, it's got to go through committees and all that kind of stuff, but ultimately it has to pass in both. So
those seem to have bipartisan support though, which is good. It's pretty promising.
Hopefully it does. But, last year Minnesota has cottage food laws, which basically means that if you don't produce on a certain level with foods, And it's a, it's a list of foods that you're allowed to make and take to a farmer's market or sell from home. That if you don't produce as long as you produce under a certain level, you aren't considered commercial. And so those are called cottage food laws. And you can just, like bake bread in your kitchen and sell it to people, or pies or cakes or canned jelly or salsa or any of that kind of stuff. And it's perfectly legal. So they had taken the cottage food laws and had made some amendments that they tried to pass through the last legislative session that didn't pass. Ultimately, it didn't. So I'm not sure. It's too soon to say whether it would be bipartisan, because it's really going to depend on the environment and the mood next year. And I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But
so do you have more support from the Democrats or the Republicans on this one?
On this one, it's Republicans, and the Republicans are the minority. So
look at the Democratic Farmer Labor Party didn't sign on with this.
Yeah. Yep. But the ones that I talked to that were willing to help us out were my representative up here in our district. And I contacted him first, because he's my representative, and he's a Republican though. And then the Senate one, I don't think he's my senator, but we're basically next door. Senator Wessenberg. I don't think he's our senator up here. I think he's.
It's all wacky now. Who knows who's
I think, yeah, ours is a different one. I'm trying to remember his name, but he's a senator in a like a close neighbor district, but not directly for us, I think.
We really ought to be writing more bills.
Yeah, we should be. We should get together and put that on our list of things to do.
Yeah.
I have suggestions.
I was going to say, Harrison, you got a pet bill you want to get pushed?
Indiscriminate randomized carpet bombing.
I do not endorse that one.
Every artillery shell that lands in the U.S. does not go to Ukraine. How about that? I'll get some support with that.
Yeah, I would, if I were to write another bill, and I've already started thinking about this, like, having it raw milk for sale at farmers markets is a first step, but it's not where I would want it to stay, because I would want still be able to make cheese and yogurt and that kind of thing. So that's, once the raw milk, once it passes, then, and people warm up to that idea, then trying to expand on that and make amendments to include other types of food also would be a future thing. But the meat industry in Minnesota is kind of killing itself, because you can't get an animal processed in Minnesota without an extraordinarily long wait time to get on the list, because meat butcher shops have to have an agent overseeing the process. And there are so few butcher shops, because there's so many regulations, that are willing to go through that process, because it's so big that there's very few places that can actually process animals in Minnesota. And that's why the wait lines are so long. You can send your animal to a butcher shop, but you're only allowed to consume it for yourself. You can't resell it. So that would be another area that needs to be addressed, but maybe.
So the people who, the local farmers who offer to sell, say, a side of beef, and family members or neighbors all go in on a side of beef from a local farmer, are any of those being done under the table?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. As it should be. Bill Diagra.
Yep. I'm not going to name names, because that's not a good idea. But yeah, that happens all the time. You grow out a feeder calf, or a pig, and you're selling the live animal, or you have, but I mean, people know. So, but the product that you get is your package of meat is wrapped up and it has stamped on it, not for resale or not for sale, because that's what the butcher shops who don't have the inspector come, they have to put that on everything that they process, not for resale. But I mean,
even though they're selling it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that's the loophole. Okay, got it.
Yep. If you need somebody, I have a few people that I can get you in touch if you're looking for beef.
I'll be in touch.
Okay.
I'm particularly looking for some beefalo because apparently that's hard to get right now.
Beefalo?
Beefalo. Is that like just a mixture
Buffalo-
of meats, or do you actually crossbreed a cow and a buffalo?
It's cow and buffalo crossbreeding, and apparently
Wow.
it's the most expensive, and it's also the highest bioavailability beneath the egg for
Strange.
nutrition.
Wow.
Well,
But it's very, very expensive right now.
I have a friend who's a buffalo farmer, so if you want to cut out the beef and just stick with the buffalo, I can get you in touch.
True. There is that buffalo guy.
Yeah,
Forgot about
he's got, man, if you want good jerky, you need to come see my friend. He's got the best. It's buffalo jerky, and it's not a bad price either. I think it's like a package of jerky for, I think it was like $8-10, something like that. But the good big pieces of jerky, not those little wimpy leftover pieces you can get like at the gas station or something. That's not good jerky.
Right.
Well, we are going to wrap it up for this evening, and we'll have more interesting topics next week. And if you want to talk about something, I don't know, we'll need some suggestions, but this has been fun. And thank you guys for coming and taking part of the conversation.
I've got one.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead, Harry.
Yeah, all my jokes about Thanos snap and stuff should absolutely be taken as a call out to David Brady, because we've been talking about doing a podcast on Malthusianism, and he refuses to do that with me. So that's for you, Brady.
Well, you're going to have to send him the link.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway.
All right. Well, we will be on next week, Wednesday, same time. And if you are interested in the Libertarian Party, it's lpmn.org. And thanks for coming. So